Welcome, everyone. I'm Rachel, your moderator today. If you touch the numbers, the systems, or the strategy in your organization, they all converge here. Today's session is for CFOs, controllers, and operators who want to stop treating ERP decisions like a black box and start using them as a lever for control and clarity. So let me do some quick intros here to our field guides. I've got Bryan Willman, founder of Techfino and the NetSuite architect behind 50 plus implementations. He's the person that teams call after the burn. He's rescued more than 20 This Is on Fire projects. Also today we have Mike Spitz, founder of Spitz CPA, and he's an accomplished finance executive. He's lived both sides, implementing systems inside the business and now advising clients who want technology that actually serves finance instead of fighting it. So today, what you're going to get, if you're a CFO or controller, you're going to hear how NetSuite really pays off and when it does not, how to spot that tipping point between we've outgrown QuickBooks and we're not quite ready for it yet. If you're an operator, today you're going to hear Bryan and Mike talk about what happens when accounting and implementation talk early and how that sync really saves months of churn in the long run. If you're an advisor or a consultant today, you're probably going to hear how to frame up these ERP conversations with clients in a way that really protects trust, budget, and bandwidth to kick projects off for long-term success. So today we're going to trade real stories, what went right, what went sideways, and what both of these guys wish clients knew before they sign their first SOW. So stick around through the end. You're going to get a simple next step, which is a free 30-minute ERP optimization consult, a conversation designed to surface just one or two practical wins that you can act on right away within your accounting system. So we're going to keep this tight, pragmatic, and free of vendor fairy tales. Let's get into it. So Bryan and Mike, your relationship goes way back, I understand. And I'd like to hear a little bit about how you guys met, because I believe you met when you were identifying an opportunity to graduate someone from QuickBooks to NetSuite.
Yeah, I guess, Mike, would you like to go or would you like me to go first?
Sure. So Bryan and I met around 10 years ago when I was working as an accounting manager at a business that was in telecommunications for jails and prisons. And we had a massive challenge on our hands where we needed to bring revenue from upwards of 200 facilities around the country. We needed to bring revenue data on a daily basis, so not summary, but transactional data into our accounting software. And there were various types of revenue, local calls, long distance calls, internet usage, interlata, etc. And getting all of this data, as you can imagine, as it's happening each day in kind of a big report chunk from each facility and into NetSuite. I met Bryan, and Bryan was the outside consultant who was the NetSuite expert, and he worked with our top internal technology architect, and they worked the data, and I tested everything that came into NetSuite to make sure it matched what actually had happened at each facility, and it was a huge success. It only took around 30 days, and the company really needed it in order to have visibility on its revenue performance at all of its locations.
Wow. So Mike, how long ago was this that you two met?
This was 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Okay. Okay. So, and your relationship has evolved since then. You were colleagues working on a vendor project together in that capacity back then. Bryan, how have you and Mike stayed in touch since then?
Yeah, I forget how it really happened. I know just from our experience working together on that project, it kind of was, really all around work. But at some point, I think we had kept in touch afterwards. I know Mike was in between jobs at one point. I think that's when we, connected after that initiative. And I know before you had started your company, we were starting to work together. And I think I forget the exact date when we started, where basically I hired you, but I do remember you saying to me at one point, you educated me on the need for a controller. So I remember, I was just telling you like the problems I was having at the point, and we're like, you know what, Bryan, I think it sounds like you actually need a controller. You don't, and I was like, why do you have a tax accountant? And you explained to me what the value was of bringing in a controller and why that sounded like it was necessary. And looking back, I think that was one of the best decisions I made, and sort of fixing some of the the foundational problems that we had in our accounting and finance function here at Techfino.
I would like one thing working with a lot of startups, small and medium-sized businesses, which I've done for a long time. And by then I was a controller. And that was around 6-7 years ago, Brian, that I kind of came into the fold with Techfino. But two words I use a lot with founder owners when it comes to the finance side are visibility and digestible. And the reason for those terms is a lot of owners truly do not have visibility into their own business performance. Their P&L isn't structured well. It's not useful to them. They don't really know their margins sometimes. And then digestible is, when they are looking at reporting, is it understandable, right? Or is it messy or chaotic or what have you? So, I mean, hopefully my coming into Techfino, I mean, Brian, I think, one of the first things we did was distinguish the recurring revenue from the non-recurring, right? To make sure and make sure we could see the margins and how profitable each one was. And, and make sure we were on top of collections so that we had more cash in house and a lot of stuff like that.
That's funny. I feel like sometimes we make mistakes that we're telling our clients not to make. And, I think that's from trying to focus on helping my clients rather than my own business a lot of times. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Brian, I feel like you do that. I feel like you do that often in that you are such an authentic leader. I've heard you speak on like Paul Higgins' podcast and other places where you're really transparent about this is a lesson I had to learn. Let me help you navigate around that obstacle this time. And I really admire that about you. I wanted to just say that. And also I want to say, when you two started working together in this capacity, initially on this shared client, and then together with Techfino in this capacity, there's some shared library of knowledge in both of your expertise that when paired together, I think adds a lot of value for the process of choosing the right technology, of the implementation, of building the accounting strategy behind it, and teaching businesses how to embrace all of this. So a question for you, for either one of you, actually, I should pose it to one person or the other, but whoever wants to take this one, when companies are in growth stage, sometimes, especially in the last 2 years, we're seeing 30-40% compound annual growth rates, right? With technology and AI in some industries and some businesses, and we're seeing really fast-paced growth. What are some of the indicators or some of the things that you walk in and you see that you say, this is an indicator or a sign that it's time to go from a simple system that's one-dimensional to a multi-dimensional system, like from a QuickBooks to a NetSuite, or, from using a whole bunch of tools to do what you need to do to being able to use, one anchor tool with some additional features? What are those indicators that you commonly see?
I would say around especially around QuickBooks, what we tend to see is clients that are, managing inventory, and, there's so much complexity around that, especially in multiple locations, and, getting a consolidated view of, your different the locations and the costs and so forth. So we see just a ton of work being done outside of QuickBooks and Excel, where you're dropping down to get a consolidated report, or you don't even have, inventory costs and values that are accurate, right? So I'd say those are kind of like the big ones that jump out at me. Mike, I guess you probably know as well.
Yeah, first of all, there are several reasons I think why a company could be ready to make the leap from QuickBooks to NetSuite. One of them would be multi-entity. If they have a parent sub holding company and 2 or 3 different entities that are doing different products, so that if one of them has any legal risk, it wouldn't impair another entity of theirs. So that's a big one. Another one for NetSuite is global international stuff where, it's one world, right, Brian? That the handling currency within and being able to produce a consolidated financial statement in the home currency of a business, that's something QuickBooks certainly cannot do. There's advanced revenue recognition, ASC 606 dynamics that some of the modules in NetSuite can handle. There's the leasing standard and being able to amortize operating and finance leases. And then there's just overall dimensionality, when a company It's one thing to sell one product to, your customers, et cetera. It's another when an organization has grown so big that it's like, was this sale in which region of the country? Well, who's our accounting manager on that? Who's the salesperson? Let's automatically have commissions get calculated by our sales. QuickBooks can't do any of this stuff. And at that point, you have to graduate to NetSuite.
I think another use case is really around, when you look at it from like a systems architecture perspective, a lot of times companies start off with QuickBooks just for the accounting, and finance function. And then when you're looking at, we have our e-commerce website and then you have, maybe you have your own homegrown billing system, and now you have a sales system, and you have all these different systems that have the same customer, but with different information in it. So if you want to really kind of bring that, downstream or kind of look at everything holistically, it becomes a real challenge, right? And you have to build all these integrations to some system, right? So I feel like that's the other case when is, you just have fragmented silos throughout your business for the same records, right? The customers, your vendors, right? How many different vendors do you have, right? Is it one vendor, or do you have 5 different vendors in 5 different systems that all have the same name?
I agree with that. And especially in the world of inventory COGS, where QuickBooks still can't really effectively handle kitting and it's always, you have to use, like, some people use 2 outside third-party softwares with QuickBooks to handle their inventory COGS needs, whereas NetSuite can handle it internally.
This is really interesting to me. Listening to the various ways, or reasons that we need these softwares and all the things that we can do within it. You talked about inventory COGS, multi-entity, reporting dimensionality, consolidated reporting, FP&A, right? Like budgeting and forecasting. Like there's all of these vendor management. There's all of these things that pull into this. And what do you feel like is the experience of the companies that are on a system that's not a good fit? Like, how does that impact their day-to-day or their month-end close or their the credibility with their leadership team or the board? Like, tell me more about, like, when you're on the wrong system, how does that trickle down or impact the business?
I think there's just a lot of inefficiency, and from a visibility perspective, you may hear, I'll have to get this from somebody else. I'll have to get the latest report. I don't know. Or I can't tell you right now, but in like a week I can. And it's like, well, a week. Wow, that's a long time to kind of wait for that. I don't know, Mike, what do you have?
I mean, certainly any report that's automated as opposed to manual in Excel and outside of the business, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer at that point that you want your software producing your reporting, your intelligence, so that it's actionable quickly, right? And it's a time issue there, right? And less manual error, right? Like if an automation is set up accurately, you're removing human error as well. So yeah, and again, I mean, it's like if an organization is north of like 20 million in revenue a year, there's just so much complexity, unless it's somehow like a really simple service business or very simple CPG business. It's gonna have more needs to understand how it's performing and understand its margins, and that it has to graduate and it needs automation.
Let's talk about for operators within the business. What happens when, let's say that they recognize these efficiencies or room for automation and the need for upgrading from QuickBooks to a system like NetSuite, and let's say that they move forward. These ops folks that come to you and work with you to do this, what are some things that they need to know about what to do up front and how to plan and structure and build before day one of go in and get a vendor and build technology? What are some of the best practices, the really smart strategic things up front that they need to know? Because this isn't just a technology play, right? When you bring NetSuite in, it's bigger than that. So talk to me about what advice we would give to operators in that situation.
I think that laying the foundation at the beginning of a scope and an implementation is so important. Getting it right the first time. Both Bryan and myself I've always joked that I'm a janitor and a plumber, okay, of how many sets of books I've had to fix and clean in my life. And then I had a client say, no, no, Mike, say that you're a doctor and that you operate on these books. That sounds better. But like, there's just the setup and getting it right the first time, whether it's your items that are used for your SKUs in sales, whether it's your chart of accounts, which is going to dictate what your balance sheet and your P&L look like, your approval flow to pay AP out of NetSuite and have it all be in the same software. Bryan, what are your thoughts of like just how, and the thing is, you need both parts. You need the accountants who, like myself, who need to know what the final result needs to be in reporting and internal controls. And yet you need your software expert, your solution architect like Bryan, to actually execute it and make it happen in the software. Bryan, what are your thoughts at the outset of a new engagement?
Right. So I kind of look at it from, top down. You have your system selection, right? And so sometimes if you make a mistake there, then you're kind of spending a lot of time working around that, or you've created problems that are now creating projects, and those projects are to, basically work around those system limitations. The other is just the business process, the roles and responsibilities and the workflows. Like think about how is this process going to run? So I look at it from a process standpoint, I look at it from a structural perspective, like how many roles am I going to have? And in some cases, you might, like in NetSuite, you can create a role that's like a hat somebody wears. So you might wear a hat, but not actually, it may not be an entire job function. In other cases, the system will only allow you to give that person one role, right? And then you have to really work within that one role, and you might give them too much or not enough access depending on the type of system. Some of these point solutions that you see for different industries, they are really popular in the industry, but they don't have that connectivity to, they don't have an open API you can connect to. So it just creates a ton of extra work. And so the question is like, well, what are you hoping to get by using this proprietary system? Is that going to help you grow in 5 or 10 years? Are you going to be calling me in 5 years because you need to replace this, the system that, connects 2 or 3 different functions that you should have picked the best in class solution for, and then sort of, integrate it a lot easier than sort of using this, custom module just for your field service team that maybe should have been sort of built into your, e-commerce and accounting system all in one. And then you wouldn't have to worry about that expensive integration project. So I feel like it's just getting clear on like, what are the goals and challenges, and thinking through that experience, like how are we going to make this decision, sort of make the right one so it doesn't create a ton of technical debt. And we can think about it from a system, perspective. Less is more. So you want to have less, vendors, but sometimes you get a better solution for the end-to-end process by having maybe a best-in-class system instead of using the native one. So in some cases, we'll suggest using a project management tool that's not NetSuite, right? NetSuite's project management tool is good for certain use cases. Other cases, you'll want to use, bring your own project management tool and integrate it to NetSuite, right? So when you create, a new project in NetSuite, you could do the billing in NetSuite time entry, but then you create an actual project that's easier to set up and has more faster capabilities for quicker projects where you need to invite customers into your portal, quickly change the project that's constantly dynamic. In NetSuite, it's kind of very painful to create all these projects because every time you create a new task, you have to open up a new page. It's like, okay, so that user experience, that's what I would be thinking about. Okay, is this acceptable? Then let's go through a demo. Let's kind of see what that process would look like and optimize that, because maybe it's better to use this system for this system for that. And so it's working with the users and the roles and going through, is this system going to solve your problem and make you efficient, make you better? You're going to have the data that you need, or are we going to have to spend a whole project or two just getting ready before we go and purchase a system and plug it in?
Mike, what are your favorite features of NetSuite? What's on your love and hate list of NetSuite features?
I like that.
I think it's the customization and flexibility of it. That it's like programmable effectively, right? Like you really can't do that if you're an entry-level business in QuickBooks. So a good example of that I mentioned earlier is like commissions, right? Like you book sales, right? And at the end of every quarter, your salespeople have earned whatever their cut is, right, from those sales. Well, how about having a system that does that automatically? And that's not manual work. Could you imagine the difference between an accountant having to look at every invoice, right, that a company has for in a 90-day period? And who was the salesperson on this? And did they get 15% on that one? Or do they get 10? Or have they hit the this, and that? And you can imagine how many inputs and variables you could have around something like that, and how manual that could take, like 3-4 hours or something like that. Whereas, I've seen Techfino do this a few times over. They'll automate the entire thing, to where at the end of a quarter, it could be a commission due to someone external. It could be one of your employees. It could be whatever it is. But bang, you look at the report, you're done. So I would say customization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could get into little things like its search bar at the top is I might seem silly and such a small thing, but it's a really accurate search feature of like anything you're looking for that happened historical. Instead of digging through the menus, you can kind of type it out at the beginning and usually find it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really strong with that.
Yeah. Brian, from an
One
architect.
CFO that we're doing like a sales demo, I remember, and we just kind of showed, an income statement and how you could click into, a number on a line, and it would show you all the invoices that made up that, that revenue for that period. And then you could click into that and go right into the invoice, and then from there, go to the sales order. And he was just like, wow, you can, everything's, drill downable and traceable. So you can see how you got here. And then your sales order can have your contract, right? You can, assess that. So I feel like having that whole traceability, that chain, so you can see from beginning to end, you can tell that story basically financially and also from a transactional perspective. I didn't realize how powerful it was until seeing his like jaw drop explaining that. So that was what I found. I think on some of the reporting, I know like we've, one of the ones that you brought up to me, Mike, was just around the balance sheet, how the balance sheet will show you from the beginning of time by default. And it's like, well, we know we can, build you a 12-month balance sheet, but you have to do a little bit of customization configuration to get that right. The one that comes right out of the box is showing you from the beginning of time, but you're like, why does NetSuite do this, right? So I know that was one that we've talked about in the past. I'm sure there's a couple other ones, but the one that's kind of I keep thinking is just more of an annoying is like if you go to build a saved search, or if you go to a saved search, just a quick and dirty report, it doesn't show up in your little menu. I wish it did. So that's like one of those like, why does NetSuite not just do this? But I think in terms of like the power, like once I'm able to show people what you can do with NetSuite as a platform, and they see it, they're like, oh, wow, okay, so I can take this manual process that was done in email, like we were tracking our inventory, like when it gets damaged or it gets returned, and there's vendors, they were basically creating like a vendor management process around, inventory that had damages, needed to be returned, wasn't, in the right, they didn't get the right thing. And it was all being done in email. Once I showed the manager, the retail manager, she was like, oh, wow, can we do that? I think we're going to do this in NetSuite. So she came back to me with a, sort of a project request after sort of educating her about that a few months earlier. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. I feel like a lot of folks, once they realize that, they're like, oh, wow. So
I agree with you, Brian, on related records. It's really strong in NetSuite. It's really nice how like you can, the moving around between the financial transactions versus the contracts and who's your contact, the way that it's a CRM and an accounting software all in one integrates really nicely, really efficiently. Things that could take at another company, you're maybe going and finding a PDF in a folder, right, on a drive, right? Whereas it's all just there in NetSuite, and the UI UX, for those unfamiliar, the user interface, user experience of NetSuite, I do think it's really one of the best. Like you don't really comb NetSuite pages wondering where stuff is too much. It's pretty apparent. It's pretty intuitive.
And at SuiteWorld this year, they showed NetSuite Next, which was like basically the next innovation that they have for building AI into the suite. but they're also doing a new rebranding on the UX, so it's going to even be better. I mean, just what I saw at SuiteWorld was like, oh wow, that's cool. So you have dark mode now, you have dark mode, light mode, and that's going to be pretty sassy. So look out for
So
that.
we have a fashionable NetSuite coming.
Yes, exactly.
Good looking. Yeah, and on that note too, like when you first log into NetSuite, the quick links to what's important to you is a great feature.
Yeah, and I think you now have the workbooks built in that give you a little bit better reports. That used to be, some things where you want to see the item and the name and then the account number in the same report. But you couldn't really do that in the report builder. But you can now with the workbooks. There's a couple other use cases too, but just the 360 customer view where you can see sort of the lifetime value of the customer, all their transactions, their revenue by year now built in. They're building a lot more of these analytics in using those workbooks. And of course, if you go down the path of like a NetSuite Analytics warehouse or things like that, you certainly get much more reporting capability that's built in. And talking to NetSuite outside of NetSuite in like an SPB or even Analytics warehouse or EPM. But just, I'd say from the ability to sort of see all aspects of that relationship, that customer, for example, you have all their like e-commerce transactions for the e-com team. And then you may have sort of your orders that they purchased in the store, and you can see both of those and handle both of those seamlessly, right? And then also be able to see all of their customer cases that they have in terms of customer support, things like that. So just tying it all together gives you all that reporting to really understand your customer. Now with AI coming, it's really going to give you even more power, from an analytics and intelligence perspective. So that's really, I think, the power with NetSuite is it's really trying to build as much of that single source of truth already as part of their architecture and design. And that's what you really need to take advantage of AI. It really all comes down to the data and having it in a clean, manageable format. And that's really like what NetSuite strives to do. So I feel like that's, really giving the foundation to innovate and grow and be already ready for AI when it's here.
And Bryan and I both know of a business that'll remain nameless where they chose a third-party software and it became ambiguous which database is the source of truth. And there's a lot of conflict there. And to Bryan's point, when you're dealing with financial data and customers and vendors and what's your source of truth, we want one database and to keep it clean. And NetSuite's really capable of doing that for many industries and business types.
So, okay, we've talked about accounting, we've talked about systems design, we've talked about implementation, integration, understanding the workflows and all that stuff. One big challenge I want to hear your thoughts on, or your advice around, and that is in the world of change management, you've got organizations with people who have been doing things certain ways for years and for lots of time. And sometimes do you encounter a situation where you walk in and you seek to understand and you build a new process, but there's got to be some mindset shifts that happen in order for this project to be successful, in order for the true operational efficiency and automation potential to be recognized here to make the shift to get the most out of this. So my question to both of you would be either an anecdote or a piece of advice or your thought about maybe what are some of the top mindset shifts that need to happen to make this successful.
I always find those fairly easy to navigate if you communicate it correctly. That like, hey, we're changing what you're doing, but guess what? This task that took you 4 hours is now 10 minutes, right? And here's why. And here's what we need you to do. And you used to do this a little differently. Now you're going to do this. And again, a lot of it in the setup phase. So take like, a contract, right? Like Bryan and I sort of touched on deferred revenue earlier, where it's like what might have been a lot of laborious work in a spreadsheet, if you tell an organization leader, hey, if your salesperson puts in, what date does this start? What date does this end? How much is it for? Et cetera, and you no longer need an accountant or anyone else spending all this time to monitor that contract. The system's going to do it automatically. Like people are pretty agreeable to that. And like anytime you're telling, I think anyone of a certain level, middle level and above that, like, hey, this is foreign to you. You're used to it a certain way, but this is for sure going to be less time for you going forward. I think that's the key there. It's just that it'll be more efficient. Bryan, I mean, do you feel like you face a lot of
Oh, yeah. It's a
resistance
little
for
bit
new
different, I
projects?
think, in my experience, because I've had, what I'll call like user adoption holdouts, where it's, the CFO has implemented this new accounting system, and I'm used to the old system, and I don't like it. It's da 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 da. And so nobody really maybe sat down with that person that's, not really embracing this new tool, deciding not to use it, or, complaining about it or not happy with it, to say, how is your job? What are your sticking points? What is your pain points? So I feel like you have to have that feedback loop. And if you have somebody that's holding out, figure out what it is that like, what's the one thing that you're really struggling with? And one of our clients, by just asking that question, I found out it was performance, and they were saying it was really slow. And so I said, well, can we look at that? Can we analyze the performance of what your expectations are and what you need it to be? And I'm pretty sure I can solve that. And once we did, the whole morale, the whole like, okay, using this tool and process changed. And for that leader, it was like, okay, I'm actually bringing my team into the problem. I'm asking them what do they want? How slow is it for them? Oh, it took them 40 minutes to enter a PO. Man, that's a really long time to enter a PO. So if we can get that down to 5 minutes, if we can get that down to 3 minutes, what would that do for them? Well, they would love it, because then they could go and do this. Okay, well, let's solve that. Let's do that. And when we did that, it was a big win. It was a huge win for that project and that client. And so I think you have to ask the question of like, is this working? And so I feel like that's the assessment piece. And so once you've done an implementation, a lot of clients are like, okay, I put my budget into this implementation of the software. Now we should be good. No, you've just embarked on a journey, and you've basically, upgraded your accounting system and software. And this is a journey that doesn't end. And I'm always, upgrading my accounting system. And I've been doing it since I've been on NetSuite since 2018. And I always got a backlog of things I want to do, and things I want to tinker with and improve. And I think that's the thing is, you really need to sometimes we have to train our clients that, like, you just bought a platform, a system that you can build on top of, and you need to understand what you have here. You may only be using it to a fraction of its ability, and a lot of times you are, right? And so, our challenge is to educate clients on what you can do so that they can envision the future and how they can optimize their processes and things like that. So that's the other thing I'd say too when it comes to this.
Yeah. And always to explain to people why you're doing it. So let's say it's someone at a clerical level who's used to, like, hey, I used to just send a customer a bill and I'm done and it's easy. And now you're telling me I have to say West Region and I have to put this other company's name, and everything I do is like more, right? Well, I mean, at that point, some leader or manager has to explain, yeah, but all of that information matters. It's important because it leads to our reporting. And we're able to see how our company does on the West Coast versus the Midwest, right? Or how much of this we're selling, this kind versus that kind, or what have you. And I just feel like a lot of that is in the delivery. But I mean, hey, you can always have a person who's resistant to change, no matter what.
I like that because it ties into not just what we do, but who we are as people, right? And planning this strategically. The whole point of this is collaboration between the accounting and the data and all of the teams with the IT teams. That it's not just a tech implementation. That we're all sort of in this together, and that's your approach, and I love that. Are there any other final thoughts or things that we didn't get to talk about that you'd like to bring up here? Because I think it's important that we uh, understand that NetSuite is not just a tool, but it's an ecosystem. We've talked about a lot of things we can do within it today, but I wanted to point
Yeah, I
that
was
out.
curious, Mike, what's your, I guess, favorite solutions for the different functional areas outside of NetSuite? So a lot of times when we sell and implement NetSuite, there's usually a couple other vendors that get brought in, or get added into the solution suite. So the ones that I know that we work with that you've made me aware of, I think, are Ramp. And I'd love to hear why you love that one so much. And then we implemented Bill.com here at Techfino, thanks to Mike's sort of advocating for that. And we could have done what we're doing with Bill.com inside NetSuite, but it was just easier and faster for Mike to recommend Bill.com and for us to implement that tool and stand that up. And we recommend Bill.com to our clients as well. There's a couple that, because you worked a lot on the West Coast, we tend to work coast to coast. But I definitely feel like in Silicon Valley, you see some of the same sort of software tools in the mix, like Bill.com. Just curious, I know you had a lot more experience with this than me. What tools you tend to see, like on the tax automation, like Avalara, Vertex, those are the two that we work with a lot. In terms of like the tools that you love, like I know we love Gusto for small businesses, small mid-sized businesses. I really wish it would integrate with NetSuite. I'm sure you probably more than me, you have a lot more clients that are probably running it besides just Techfino. But yeah, I'm just curious, like what do you think from the tech stack around NetSuite?
The preferred tech stack. I mean, it's interesting in that like NetSuite has such a good AP process and approval flow where like if even better than Bill.com from the standpoint of like if you reject a bill, it goes straight back to the person who originally submitted and they can like you can leave a note and they can edit it and resubmit it again. But the advantage that made Bill.com so important is that everyone gives Bill.com, this middleman, their bank account info. So that if two people connect on Bill.com, there's no manual error potential for someone's bank account info. If A needs to pay B and they just connect on Bill.com, well, that means B gave Bill.com their bank info and A doesn't have to enter it in and can't screw up effectively. Okay, assuming both are signed up. So, and it has a really, really good UI UX. And I was going to tell you, it's the combination of UI UX and affordability, I think, are what really like makes a tech stack, what makes you a favorite in the tech stack. So Bill.com, their interface, where like for any given bill, on the left-hand side, you see the PDF of the bill. On the right-hand side, you see how you're coding it. It's invoice date, it's due date, it's approvers, who's approved yet, who hasn't, etc. It's just such a good interface. And on the last page, to be able to just click which ones you want to pay and when you want to pay them, it's like not many softwares can achieve that. So then for payroll, as you said, Gusto for sure. They are the UI UX king of payroll. They're way ahead of ADP, Paychex, some of the dinosaurs there. God, do we both wish they integrated with NetSuite, as you said. Ramp is a terrific credit card product with incredible flexibility. If you're an organization where you need 50, 60 people who have credit cards and some are drivers or some are in the field and you only want them to have a credit limit of $500, right? So that you limit your risk and what have you. And you can have these cards be virtual and in their phones and don't even have to worry about a hard copy of them. And then Ramp throws in the employee reimbursement software for free. They're making a serious attempt in the bill pay space as well. That's getting very competitive, very interesting. QuickBooks is going heavy into that as well, to just be able to pay people straight out of QuickBooks. It's still Gmail in the email space, although we have things like Superhuman on the way, et cetera, versus, but instead of Microsoft. And I was also going to tell you, because I know you asked me about this previously, that like for the mid-sized business space, this isn't just because, Techfino is a VAR for NetSuite, but I personally very much believe NetSuite is best in class over Intact or Microsoft Dynamics. And again, just ease of use, flexibility, UI UX, intuitiveness, etc. And I mean, one other, hey, if you're going to actually make me go into the software stack, I'm also a big fan of Mercury, the fintech, when it comes to banking. They're what Silicon Valley should have been, but wasn't. Okay, and they're still around because they got purchased by the bank from North Carolina. The name escapes me right now. Rachel, I don't know if you, being a North Carolinian, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but Mercury has great tech and is very like, oh, you need to pay someone, you want to wire them for free or ACH them for free? Put in the routing, put in the account, let's go. You're not like, where do I click? I need 1 million approvals, this and that. No, their tech is excellent.
And it works well for international transactions as well.
Yeah, Mercury's killing it.
How about on, I know NetSuite just announced basically, a 0-day close solution. That was, I think, one of the bigger announcements that NetSuite came out. So, normally we would probably be working with like a Blackline, or there's a couple of these. Do you have any experience working with any other tools, and which one do you like the most?
No, I mean, with AI and all this speculation on what AI will or won't do, we'll always have some human element to many of the things we do, right? So when it comes to a monthly close, you need a bank statement, right? So it's like, will AI be able to like talk to your bank and have access, to go grab a bank statement and complete a bank rec without any humans?
Yep.
Maybe. Will it be able to look at what bills went to prepaid expense and determine, oh, okay, well, this one I think is going to, we're paying for a service that lasts from November through March, and we'll just automatically have a prepaid schedule going for this prepaid expense, or and depreciation entries and all the loan interest and this and that. Like, we will
I think a
see.
lot of that's still going to be automated for sure. I mean, we have one client that's basically they are using ChatGPT to basically read an inbox, and some of them are images, PDFs, some of them are in the body of the email, some are attachment, some are they're just coming in all different wild formats, and they have a ChatGPT agent that would read that inbox and then create a transaction in NetSuite, and then they realized it was hallucinating. It was good at at the line level, they were just having so many issues. So they created sort of three agents, using that pattern to kind of pick. And if all three agents come up with the same answer, then they create it and it's posting. If not, they create it, it's not posting. Somebody has to review it and approve it, and it has the attachment in there. So it just kind of, took a job that was like somebody was doing this manually, that every day, and sort of said, now instead of actually keying this in, so you got rid of that whole time expense of finding the email, reading it, creating a transaction. Now to just reviewing transactions, the ones that don't all match. And once you get to that point, like that's a huge time savings. And they're doing that inside NetSuite with ChatGPT.
Well, Rachel recently told me that instead of us all emailing each other soon, it might be our AIs all communicate. And I'm still curious, like if a client were to ask me, hey, Mike, can you send me a copy of my 2023 tax return or something? Like, will the AI be able to like go into the folder, get the right doc, like, hey, your password is this, and like, and send it out? I look forward to that future.
AI governance.
We've been experimenting with some of that where we install like Claude code, for example, on the terminal of the machine and give it access to our folder system and our file structure. And there's an instruction file on the terminal in the particular location with all the passwords or whatever it is. We've been experimenting with that in secure ways with non critical data, things like writing blogs and such, not financial data, but the capacity is here. It's just a matter of how do we do this responsibly. And Bryan, I know you've spent a lot of time even lately digging into this a little bit, but Ethan Mullick said just recently, if all AI development were to stop today, no more, we're done, just stop, it would take society 10 years to catch up to just what exists today.
Wow.
The capability that exists today, right? It's dynamic and interesting and fun and all of that, but there's also like a governance and an ethical side of this and a responsible side of how we do all of this. But it's really fun to think about the possibilities. And well, this has been a great conversation and a lot of good valid points in here. Just to sum it up, at the end of the day, NetSuite isn't just a system upgrade. I think it's really a strategic shift. And when accounting leaders set the vision early and collaborate with tech leaders and tech architects, it's easy then to avoid some of the chaos, protect margins, build a financial foundation, and all of that. So, Mike, you and Bryan both have seen the good, the bad. You've had the recoveries and helped companies save millions of dollars. And I think the takeaway here today is really kind of simple. When finance and implementation are aligned from day one, NetSuite becomes this growth engine, not a headache. It becomes an ecosystem for, helping companies meet those growth goals and progress their businesses into the future. And the outcome, that's the outcome that every CFO should demand. That's the outcome that every ops leader wants to see at the end of the day. So really appreciate the stories and the expertise and the two of you coming together to share, both the accounting leadership and the tech leadership, and how when those two are married together, we can really see what's best for the business and put those things into place. So thank you for today.